Tom Slater, I'll put that question to you again. We were discussing it earlier, but it is, the biggest topic this week so far. We'll see what happens later in this week. It is extraordinary that the Prime Minister has the criticism from the right, such as we're going to call it left and right. We've had conversations the last half hour that do these things have meaning. You know what I mean roughly by that. But criticisms on the right basically saying, we don't believe a word you say. 5 minutes ago you were saying open borders and calling anyone who talked about this stuff far right and the like, and racist and bigoted. Now you're saying this because you're worried about reform. Prime Minister saying he believes in what he's saying. The left of his party and those who were suspended from his party for being too far out of beyond the pale, like John McDonnell, they're accusing him of being far right himself. They're accusing him of being Enoch Powell. What do you make of him kind of caught in the middle? And do you think this is going to pay off for him?
Well, only in the immediate short term, because it's upset the right kind of people. And if the point of that speech was to strike a very clear note that Labour want to tackle immigration, that even if it doesn't convince a whole swathe of voters who might have abandoned them previously, maybe it will convince enough to think that they're a safe pair of hands on this front. But, you look under the bonnet, it's so clear that this is going to make nowhere near enough difference, even if all of their estimates turn out to be correct.
Yeah.
In terms of bringing numbers down.
100,000 is the number the Home Office thinks they're going to get it down. 100,000 a year, but it's currently at 728,000.
And it's going to be nowhere near what it was before Brexit, let alone when the last Labour government left office. So if you're a voter who's particularly concerned about this issue, who wants it to be tackled, this is going to look like more tinkering around the edges.
Because that's what it is.
No, absolutely.
Even though I think all the measures individually are good.
And it's one of those things where if absent reform, if reform weren't on the march in the way that they are currently, this could have been a smarter play for Labour, because the issue has been neutralised for the Tories because they've so fundamentally failed. They said one thing and did another. They basically perpetrate a form of political fraud on the electorate over many elections. Even Boris Johnson was elected on a ticket of reducing migration. He kept the numbers vague, but still, and they've delivered it in absolutely record numbers. If you didn't have reform coming through, it would have been a lot easier for Labour to use this as an opportunity to not necessarily gain credibility, but the issue's been neutralised.
No, but they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't have done it.
Because that may well
no
be the case,
one actually believes that Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer, who have basically, the quotes are there are just so many quotes every time that they've supported mass immigration. And Keir Starmer back in 2020 got elected. He said he promised to have an immigration system based on compassion and dignity, end indefinite detention, called for the closure of centres like Yarlswood and like. But he said that he authored it back in 1988. Yeah, people might have changed their views since then. He was probably at uni then. He authored a review of immigration law and practice, in which he argued that all immigration law is racist. Yvette Cooper was literally 2015 with the Syrian refugees. Come on in the waters, lovely. Every time that someone has ever talked about cutting migration levels, whoever it is, anyone on the front bench has at some point said that's xenophobic, that's racist, you can't do that. They are pretty much in favour of open borders.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Not just with the EU.
But it also, what I suppose has been telling is that they recognised even before the election that they had to start at least pretending to tilt in this direction.
Lip service.
You had Keir Starmer saying that the open borders experiment of the Tories has been a disaster. Even in the election campaign, he was talking about how legal immigration has got completely out of control. It's a complete failure. We need to bring it down. The thing is, that could have worked, and that could have shored up some support about people who are otherwise a bit sceptical about the Labour Party, because we all know that they don't believe what they're saying on questions like immigration. If you didn't have reform, who is just eating not only the Tories' lunch but increasingly Labour's as well. So it's one of those things where I think he's going to get a hell of a lot of flack and not bank a lot of benefit for it.
That's where I am. It's a losing game, but it is untenable to continue the Labour policy to support this. And again, you could get away with it when the Tories said the right things but were useless at doing the right things, which they were. And they did, as you say, categorically. And Boris Johnson, the people... It absolutely breaks my soul that there are people who are still pushing. Daily Mail apparently still think, Boris Johnson is a winner. These polls more in common others suggesting he's the man who could rescue the Tories. This is abject nonsense. As Farage would point out every single day, he's the author of the Boris bounce. It wasn't when people voted for Brexit. It wasn't because everyone was angry about immigration. It was a factor. The key thing was we wanted to have control. What we didn't want is politicians going, oh, it's not our problem. Nothing to do do with us. What we want is people to say, we want you to be accountable to us. That's what we want. And we said we want to take back control and we get Brexit done. We didn't give a free for all for Boris Johnson to allow 1.2 million people into the country in 1 year, more than left. I mean, the numbers are staggering. They are staggering. We're letting in we're letting in basically the best part of Birmingham every single year. We're not building a new Birmingham every year. They've got to live somewhere. The numbers don't add up, quite apart from the cultural integration issues. I mean, the economic numbers don't add up, the cultural integration actually don't add up. I said to a friend the other day, I said, what do you think net migration was? It hasn't got that big. I mean, it started under Blair. But what do you think it was before Blair and the Eastern Europeans, basically the door being open to the the accession states? Of course, I think wasn't it the prediction from the Home Office 13,000 people would come, and it ended up being, I think, 500,000, give or take, only in a few years later. But I said, what do you think? What is our rough history in terms of the number of people net arriving in this country? And they were like, 100,000, no, 20 to 30,000. That was the norm. And yet we were able to run social care. We were able to run the NHS. We were able to do all of these things. We had people to do these jobs. And now miraculously we don't, when we've got 9 million people who are working age who are not working. OK, 4 million of those, carers, students, doing other things. Got 5 million people, best part of, who are either unemployed, on sickness benefits of some questionable sort or not, who could be doing these jobs. We need to train these people up. We deliberately limit the number of people who can train as doctors and nurses. Then we say, we haven't got enough doctors and nurses, we need to import them. We have an insane economy.
And it's the way in which immigration is being used to basically mask failure elsewhere in the system. Is shocking.
Failure in training, failure in skills, education, growth, and failure in welfare,
productivity, and so on. I mean, the fact that it's just has artificially kept GDP numbers up, whereas if you look at GDP per head, it's clearly going pretty much in the other direction. Is shocking, and it's something which is it's so telling that in the discussions about this, you have people who suddenly just start to look into the middle distance and talk about values and so on. That's all fine and good. A lot of those things I'm sure we agree on. That's not the material issues that we're talking about, which is that the kind of welcoming the water's lovely, let's build a great society together and all be integrated and whatever. It's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about immigration being used to mask failures, meanwhile integration being actively mitigated against under this policy of multiculturalism. It's a terrible mix. Ordinary people have noticed this for a while. The politicians have noticed it about 5 minutes ago, and it's telling that they still struggle to articulate some of these issues.
Do you think they didn't notice? I mean, look, David Cameron made speeches about this. I mean, if everyone has made speeches about this and pointed it out and then done absolutely zero about it, because I don't know how they can ignore it. Now, and I've pointed this out a million times before, but I'm carrying on. As someone who lives in that sort of North London middle-class world, I know these people. My family knows these people.
You walk amongst these people.
I walk amongst these people, and they sort of hiss at me as I walk past them on Hampstead Heath. It's great fun. They despise me. Oh, for Julia. I literally have people, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's wonderful, and I have a big beam on my face. It genuinely happens. It's a joy to me. It really is. But genuinely, I know how they think, and they and I benefit from it as well. It's like, if your job isn't being taken, if you're not competing for people who are new arrivals on low skilled, low income jobs where the wages are not ever going to go up because they never have to, because we can just import more people. If you're not competing for that level of housing, whether it's social housing, council housing, whether it's in the rental market, if you are not having to send your kid to a local, absolutely, completely well below, bog standard, sink local school where lots of kids turn up who can't speak English as first language. Yes, I know London schools have done very well with a lot of immigrant children. Yeah, certain immigrant groups do fantastically well because the emphasis on family and education. Other immigrant groups don't do so well, and a lot of it depends on whether the children speak English fluently or not. These are key factors. If you're not competing on this, you're not impacted by that, then you're fine. All you're doing is sitting there going, oh good, I've got a lovely cheap nanny. I've got a lovely builder, whether it's from Poland or nanny from wherever. I've got the coffee is cheap. All of the goods I buy in the supermarket are cheaper because we've got foreign people picking them from the ground. I mean, you are living in a world where you get all the benefits of this, and you can go, we've got a lovely local deli. I mean, frankly, sod off. These people are completely and utterly ignoring the huge impact that these changes have made, not just the numbers, but the cultural changes, have on local neighbourhoods of many, many other people, and they're living in cloud cuckoo land.
No, they don't know the nation in which they're talking about, and you see that even when they suggest that to be concerned about mass immigration combined with multiculturalism, all these issues that we're talking about, the way in which it's being used to prop up a stuttering economy, to act as if that's a kind of racist thing is bizarre. Some of the most migration sceptical people I know are of immigrant background.
Because they're often at the bottom of the pile, and they're the ones being hurt the worst.
Absolutely. They're as concerned as anyone else about the housing shortages and the way that's going to pan out for their children. You know, a third of ethnic minorities voted for Brexit. I mean, this is something which I find so bizarre. Meanwhile, the people who are trying to pretend that these changes haven't taken place, trying to pretend that there's no problem whatsoever, often white as driven snow. So it's one of those bizarre kind of factors of this debate. They don't know the country they live in many different respects.
They really, really do not, do they? Let me talk about something completely different. Let's talk about the US president. He's in the Middle East. He's arrived. As many Western leaders do, he arrives in places like Saudi Arabia, and everyone just pretends that they're normal countries, and everyone pretends that the Crown Prince there is a wonderful reformist. He's actually, listened on the telephone as a Western journalist was slaughtered and his body cut up in the Saudi embassy in Saudi Arabia, in Istanbul. Let's not forget that. It's a small point, I think, worth making. This man is a murderous dictator, a tyrant. However, he's better than the alternative in Saudi Arabia, which is why we do business with him, because it's either him or the jihadis. Those are the choices we make. However, we've got Donald Trump over doing a tour of the Middle East, the potentates. He's not going to Israel, which I think is very telling. The Israeli government, by all means, said, please come and include us in your 4-day trip. He's talked about possibly going to Istanbul if Vladimir Putin turns up for talks with Zelensky for peace in Ukraine. Got a lot of balls in the air there. Meanwhile, he's accepted a $400 million gift from the Qatari government of a new Air Force One jet, jumbo jet. What do you make of this?
It's an incredible story, isn't it? It's something which has proven incredibly controversial, even amongst Trump's sort of own base, the sort of influence around him, the propagandists around him. It's seen as a tremendous own goal, not partly because of how crooked it looks like, but also for all the reasons we know about Qatar. I mean, Qatar is basically the political base of Hamas. I mean, Qatar has been harbouring these people for a very long time. This is not a pleasant regime by any stretch of the imagination.
They're given far too much credit in negotiating hostage releases and the like.
No, exactly. I mean, they're basically just the sort of office space for Hamas and its Politburo, and has been for a very long time, allowed those...
And not just Hamas, Hezbollah, other leaders, able to... But this
giving them a base to enrich themselves.
There are various aspects here. One is there's actually part of the American Constitution is you're not allowed to take gifts from foreign governments. It's inappropriate, apart from the bribery aspects. There's this concern that the plane is going to go after the term of office of this president is going to go to his presidential library. So yeah, I'm sure that multi-million-dollar...
How big is this library?
Yeah, exactly. It's a big library. I reckon that's going to be used occasionally, isn't it, by the Trump family? I think we can safely say. But I mean, President's saying, look, it's all open above board, so how can it be dodgy? Because I mean, this is not a strong argument. It's like the argument of if we elect really, really rich people, they won't be able to bribery and corruption. Yeah, because that's absolutely the thing we know about very rich people. They're not motivated by money. That's the really key fact we know about them. But also the fact that Qatar, I say, harbouring all these terrorist groups, Qatar's not our friend. The idea that your foreign government in the Middle East could build this plane, and apparently it's sitting in America already, but that's surely a security risk, isn't it? God knows what had been implanted into it.
I mean, there's even been, security risks within the West from time to time. Like when Angela Merkel found out her phone was being tapped by the Obama administration government.
Or maybe you've just put your story out to a journalist in America. Exactly. You plan to bomb the Houthi rebels.
You've got to be sensible, even when you're dealing with friends, let alone with people who are very diametrically opposed to your interests. And it's that thing with Trump, isn't it? I think he likes to play up to this idea that almost like he's almost nakedly corrupt, and that's why you can trust him. But there's a certain point in which, yes, you're a very rich guy, but then maybe that just means that the gifts have to get bigger and bigger to the point where they're the size of a plane, rather than actually means that he won't take them when they're offered to him. So yeah, it's a bad look from top to bottom, I would say. And I do wonder whether, given the noise that now surrounds this, he'll quietly back away.
I think he'll carry on. But there we are. Can I also look just finally at Lucy Connolly, who's always referred to actually in articles as like the wife of a former Tory councillor. She is the woman who was given a 31-month sentence after she pleaded guilty to a racial crime for a tweet that she wrote about migrants on the day of the Southport attack in the worst of the wake of that killings by Axel Rudikabana. She pleaded guilty. A lot was reported at the time, but actually was not very accurate. There were, even I've seen reports today, she pleaded guilty and there were other racist tweets. Well, this is what the police claimed were racist. Absolutely. I mean, she should never have pleaded guilty. If she'd gone to the Free Speech Union, I'm sure they would have advised her don't plead guilty, and she would have actually got off. Horrible tweet, clearly racist, clearly horrible. Set fire to all the hostels with all the lots of bad words in it. Foul. She deleted it 4 hours later, after a few 100,000 people had read it. No evidence whatsoever that anyone was motivated by it. I think it was a horrible tweet. I think we were allowed to judge her for it. Loads that's come out about this woman since. The fact that she is a childminder, she's a carer for her children and for her sick husband. But the fact that she's a childminder to many children who are of immigrant families, and those families, by the way, all gave statements in her defence about what a wonderful woman was and how absolutely she's not racist and everything. She's a woman who had lost a child herself a few years earlier and was very traumatised by the news that children had been killed and stabbed in that awful attack in Southport. I think it's one of those things that she should have had a slap on the wrist and gone home. She hasn't even been allowed out for weekend release, which violent criminals, women have been allowed to do. She's got an appeal in court on Thursday. We'll certainly be covering that here at Talk. Should she be let out? I mean, the likes of Liz Truss and others are saying that not only should she be able to get home weekend visits with her family, her daughter apparently suffering at school and the like, but there's just no way she should be behind bars.
No, there's no plausible case in my mind that she should be. The idea that she's a kind of danger to society is clearly not the case. You can, exactly as you say, condemn the comments that she made. I don't think anyone should dismiss this as someone, having a bit of a bad day or being upset by the events.
There are consequences.
There are a lot of people who saw those horrendous events. They didn't instantly go to social media and start talking darkly about migrant hotels going up in flames. There were despicable comments. That being said, I don't think people should be put behind bars for despicable comments. Do we really think this was going to lead to further unrest? Do we really think that the people who went and did those despicable things, rather than just said had read things,
Lucy Connolly's tweet?
It's an absurdity, and it was just because
and she wasn't saying, everyone, meet at 4 o'clock. At this hostel, we're going to burn down this. Now, if she'd done that, absolutely. Now, at the time, reading the reports, there were I'm not talking about reading what people were saying on Twitter. At the time, there were court reports saying there were other racist tweets. But I thought and said, bang to rights. Lock and throw away the key. I was really horrified by what she said. But I don't think the reporting was fair. I don't think the court case was fair. I don't think the legal advice a lot of these people got. I think most of the people who were put away for things they wrote as opposed to things they did. You turn up and throw bricks or try and set fire, intimidate people, I want you in prison, got no issue with that. But we know there are people who've committed the most heinous crimes who don't get a day behind bars.
And if you look at not just the ins and outs of Lucy Connolly's case, but also, say, the Jamie Michael case, a gentleman from Wales who was one of the few who actually pleaded not guilty. It was over a video in which there was no racist comments on there whatsoever. He was just talking about the need to, because at that point there was this speculation that it might have been some kind of radicalised asylum seeker. He was just saying we need to have a public meeting about this, we need to do something about it, there are some radicalised idiots who we need to get on top of. He was arrested, he was dragged through the process. It was only out of his own kind of bloody-mindedness that he continued to plead not guilty to the point where the Free Speech Union found out about him. And you hear his story.
But people weren't being given bail, that was the key thing.
Exactly, and his story was Kafkaesque. They wouldn't, the transcript for the video was wrong. All these kind of basic things that really doesn't give you much hope that these cases were dealt with in anything like a serious
Well,
fashion.
I suppose the main thing is at least they didn't have any very Brexity things in their homes. We were talking about that case yesterday of a former police officer. In fact, there's actually going to be the police are reviewing that case of a man who's a former special constable for, again, again, for comments that are just totally and utterly nothing wrong with them whatsoever. It is really extraordinary. And again, I know, you talk about this a lot, I talk about this a lot, Free Speech Union, doing amazing work campaigning it. I know we're both big fans of the union, and remember, I think you are as well. But I just find it extraordinary. This stuff is still happening. And as we were discussing on the show yesterday, no heads ever roll. They do this, and the people who send these coppers along to meet this, the CPS prosecuting, no heads ever roll when these are such blatant infringements of our fundamental human rights.
No, and that needs to change. You can't have a situation where time and time again they're handcuffing people, often for the most trivial of things, like this horrendous Julian Faulks case, and then it's like, oh, whoops, we won't do it again.
But you do it tomorrow,
and they don't even notice themselves. It always takes someone else to point out that this was insane that you gave this man a caution. Can you strip it from his record? And 2 years later they do it with a bit of an apology. That's not good enough.
I'm still absolutely stunned, having waited many months to get my report back from the Metropolitan Police, that I do not have any non-crime hate incidents recorded against me.
I'm so sorry to hear that. You've really been trying as well.
I have to say, I frankly, I don't know what I've been doing with my time. I find it extraordinary that I don't have one, but Sorrels.